Hello, I'm Bruce Goldstein. I am President of Farmworker Justice in Washington, D.C. Thank you for joining us today. Welcome to the Facebook program series, The State of Farmworkers in America in the COVID-19 era. Farmworkers have been designated as essential workers to ensure our nation's food security during the COVID-19 pandemic. Yet their working and living conditions create grave risks to their health and economic status. We are starting to see more cases of COVID-19 among farm workers. These interview programs raise awareness about the serious challenges the pandemic imposes on farm workers and their family members each and every day. The series identifies impactful work and innovative ideas being carried out by Farmworker Justice and other organizations that represent farm workers. Farmworker Justice is a national advocacy, litigation, and education organization that works with farm worker organizations throughout the country to empower farm workers to improve their living and working conditions. So, welcome, Eva Longoria.
How are you?
Good, thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks for having me. And thank you for the work that you do. The work that y'all do is really fantastic and important and needed now more than ever. So thank you for caring about our community.
Well, thank you. For our listeners and viewers, Eva is someone who's not only a familiar face to many people throughout the world, she's someone who has garnered the respect from her community and is a revered philanthropist and activist for causes throughout the world. Her activism for farm workers has taken her to the White House and the United States Congress, where she advocated for humane immigration reform and against child labor in the agricultural fields of America. She has worked with the Mexican-American Legal Defense and Educational Fund, the Dolores Huerta Foundation, the Cesar Chavez Foundation, and the United Farm Workers Union. An accomplished producer and director, she was executive producer of two critically acclaimed documentaries on farm workers, Food Chains and The Harvest, La Cosecha, The Children Who Feed America. Both are still available on Amazon. So again, Eva, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
So you will be hosting Altissimo Live this coming Cinco de Mayo, a live stream Latin music and pop culture festival in support of the silent heroes feeding us and keeping our nation moving, our frontline farm workers. But Eva, before we talk about Altissimo, you've been very active on farm worker issues. I'd like to ask you, how did you get involved in farm worker advocacy?
Honestly, when I moved to Los Angeles 20-something years ago, and one of the first people I met was David Damien Figueroa, and I was really lucky to have run into such a philanthropic-minded, civically engaged person who came from this community. You know, he was picking in the fields when he was younger, and he introduced me to Dolores Huerta. And so I got Farmworker Justice 101 a long time ago. And I remember just asking a lot of questions when Dolores Huerta and David would tell me, you know, a lot of the rights that were gained in the civil rights movement for farm workers have been dismantled today. And I said, why? And well, you know, da-da-da-da-da-da. And I would say, but why? But what do you mean? Well, how do we fix it? And I just had question after question after question. And so finally, I just educated myself on, you know, where our food comes from. And so many people today are so interested in organic and gluten-free, and is it sprayed with pesticides? What am I ingest? They're very, very concerned about what is going into their body, but they're not really looking at the human cost of that food. You know, they look at the health benefits, or they look at, I don't want pesticides in my body. So we'll think about the person picking it, you know? And so I knew very early on in my career that I wanted to lend a voice to this community, because I respect the amount of hard work that they do for us to keep our food supply going. And you know, there's just no denying. I think that some people are disillusioned. There's no denying that there's an entire industry of agriculture dependent on migrant workers. It's just the way it is. And so we should take care of them. We should make sure they have better living conditions. We should make sure they're not earning a poverty wage. We should make sure that they have water in the fields and breaks in the fields, and that they work decent hours. And so, I really, it's not even a humanitarian effort on my behalf. It's not like it's a moral compass. This is an economic imperative that we help this community.
Right, and one of the challenges has been, with all this interest in food and healthy food and cooking interesting food and using fresh produce, to say to consumers, you need to be thinking about who the people are who are actually on the farms producing that food for you. And so one of the things that Farmworker Justice has tried to do, besides using the media and litigation and advocacy, is to work with companies, farmers, and retailers to reform the whole food supply chain and say that the retailers need to contribute more to the farmers, and the farmers need to pass that on to the farm workers. And then the retailers can say to their consumers and their customers, now we know how farm workers are treated, and they're being treated decently. We still have a long way to go.
Yeah, there was in Food Chains, the documentary I produced, we explored that. We explored a very specific group of workers in Florida who were trying to get Publix to charge a penny more per pound for tomatoes, 1 penny more per pound, and that would change the living conditions and wages for thousands of workers. And it was a fight, and we thought, we do need to educate consumers, because I think consumers wouldn't mind pitching in that penny more per pound if they knew the human cost of what was happening in the fields with their working conditions.
Right, and we've used these statistics that show that the farm workers' wages are such a tiny fraction of the ultimate price that consumers pay in the store, that you could raise farm workers' wages substantially, like by 40%. If they're making like $10 an hour, you could raise them to $14 an hour. The price change to the consumer would be like 2% or 3% on a 40% wage increase. So educating consumers about that and working with growers and retailers to make that all happen is one of our missions and activities.
Not only that, in the documentary, in Food Chains, there was a woman who was a tomato picker, and she couldn't afford the tomatoes she was picking in the fields. When she went to the supermarket, they were $3, and she didn't understand. She couldn't equate it with her work, because she would deliver buckets and buckets and buckets all day long, and it would be 10 cents a bucket she would get of tomatoes, or I don't even know the way. It was something insane. She said, how are they $3 each? And so, there's a huge discrepancy from when it's planted, when it's picked, when it's packed, and when it's produced for us. It's a food chain, and we should be aware of those people who are working hard to keep us fed.
Right, and now with COVID-19, with these farm workers working in the fields, they're busy. The stores often have limited hours, have limited food to sell. It's a real challenge for farm workers to get to a store and to be able to buy the food that they need for their families, even though during the day they're the ones in the fields producing it.
It's interesting, because before a global pandemic, it was outside of crisis times, there are so many factors that affect our farm workers: poverty, wages, substandard conditions, sexual harassment, sexual abuse in the fields, a myriad of health problems and health issues, and access to healthcare because of these health issues in the fields. So while we're all staying at home and being safe, these amazing farm workers are out there from sun up to sundown, keeping our food supply intact. And so, they're doing it under the scorching sun, and they're planting and picking and packing for us to have a nice salad. And so for me, I think, wow, this crisis of Corona has just really magnified the problems that a lot of marginalized communities are already facing. And so this just puts a spotlight on it, I think. And also, it took a global pandemic to say, oh, these workers are essential. Oh, these workers are important.
Right. One of the things we've been doing is pressing the Trump administration, which has said they're essential workers and they need to keep working. We've been pressing for occupational safety standards to be required on these farms, and they just refuse to do it. So we're working with farm worker advocates around the country who are going to the state governments and saying, well, in the absence of real leadership on these issues from the federal government, you need to lead. And there's some progress, certainly more progress in some of the states than there is at the federal level, but it needs to happen. We need to keep pressing.
Well, and we're also, hearing it's if farm workers' safety and well-being isn't being addressed, this could affect America's food supply, because due to the lack of protections in the field, the masks or gloves, the close living quarters that they live in, the lack of hand sanitizer, the lack of soap, we're gonna have a big problem if we do not take care of it. It will affect America's food supply, and so I think we need to pay attention.
Yeah, and we did a little bit of research on your background of how you learned about farm workers and did advocacy around farm workers. And so you mentioned David Damien Figueroa, who is our director of development and lives in the Coachella Valley, and reports that the temperature today there, where it's a big agricultural production area, is 106 degrees. You mentioned that you got advice from and guidance from Dolores Huerta, who we interviewed as our first guest in this series last week. And we also learned that you were kind of mentored on these issues by Antonia Hernandez. And Antonia was a farm worker as a child. She became a lawyer. She went on to become the CEO and general counsel of the Mexican American Legal Defense and Educational Fund, MALDEF, and now is the CEO of the California Community Foundation. And so I wanted to ask you how really all of them, but especially Antonia, being a lawyer, might have influenced the road you took on your advocacy for farm workers.
Yeah, Antonia's just brilliant. And, growing up, I didn't see a Latina lawyer. And so to actually, be in the presence of Antonia and her genius, her legal genius. And she has this amazing light of compassion. So you don't usually marry those two of this insane legal savant. And then she has this, heart of compassion. And so, that's really made her effective in the philanthropic world, but specifically for the Latino community. And so it's been nice to be a sponge and have absorbed some of her strategies and her approach to addressing issues for farm workers, but also just in our community, voting rights, healthcare rights, educational rights. I mean, she's really touched it all. And so it was great to be able to have been under her wing. The Dolores, of course, is just amazing and fantastic. But those two women also opened the door to thousands of other people, of like-minded people. And so when you surround yourself with, doers, people who are going to be the change that they want to see in the world, they want to be the change that they want to see for the farm workers, it's contagious. And once you're aware of problems, you can't stop. You can't turn it off. You really think about how you can help. And and you're just become equally obsessed. The other person that's been a great mentor is Tom Sines, who's the new general counsel, CEO of MALDEF. So he's also every time I had to go to the White House and argue something, I would call Tom and go, Tom, but what is secured communities, and but tell me the problem. And he would legally say, this is why it's illegal, and this is why, this is what we're asking for as a community. And he would make it very clear. And so when I got to DC, I was able to use Antonio's knowledge and Tom's knowledge and Dolores's passion, and really make a good case for human rights, because at the end of the day, immigration rights are human rights.
And I was going to ask you, most people who are watching this are familiar with your work in television, entertainment, fashion, and traveling all over the world for that work. How and why have you managed to insert this philanthropy and this charitable work on farm workers and others amidst everything else you've been involved in?
Well, it's so funny because people always ask me, why do you care about farm workers? And I said, because I eat. And I feel like sometimes people think they need some sort of connection of being, I was a farm worker, or my dad was a farm worker, and you don't. If you eat food, you should care about the people that pick it. So for me, it was as simple as that for farm worker rights and advocacy. But my philanthropic spirit really comes from my family. I have a very philanthropic family. I grew up with a special needs sister who was mentally disabled. And so my mother was a special education teacher, and we were immersed in this world of others, of being special or being special needs. And so we depended a lot on community services and community organizations and charitable organizations that really supported my sister, whether it was a monthly activity or a summer enrichment program or an after school karate class, whatever it was. I always thought, who are these people helping us? Because I didn't know them and they were strangers. And my mom said, they're volunteers, and I thought, I want to be a volunteer when I grow up. So it was ingrained in me at a very early age by my family.
And you created the Eva Longoria Foundation. What does your foundation focus on?
Well, my foundation focuses on helping Latinas improve their lives through educational programs and entrepreneurial programs. And so making sure that they have access to higher education, they know their options, they know how to get resources to go to college. If they get out of college and they want to start a business, we have classes that teach them how to access capital, how to create a business plan, what is profit and loss, what is, venture capitalist versus going to a bank, what's credit. I mean, very simple things to high level things if I want to grow my business. And these are my foundation was created to help people who fell through the cracks. It wasn't to be the solution. It was, okay, some people are falling through the cracks. But as we've seen over the last decade with my foundation is, this is the norm. And so, policy affects people. And the policies that we have currently aren't supporting our specific communities, and they're not supporting the women of our community. And so that's why my foundation focuses on Latinas because they're the future. They're the CEOs of every household. Every woman, every Latina is the CEO of her household. And so we want to support her in her dreams and endeavors and making sure we set them up for success.
And Farmworker Justice, its board of directors long ago decided that even within farm workers, there are subgroups that are especially vulnerable, and farm worker women is one of those groups. So we've always had a strong effort to help farm worker women. So recently, we prepared a film, basically a training film on workplace violence against women in agriculture. It's called Breaking the Silence. And we did it with Líderes Campesinas de California, which is a statewide farm worker women's organization that we've worked with for many years. And their executive director, Suget Lopez, will be on our program this week, as a matter of fact. So we appreciate all your work. So
Thank
I
you.
should
Yep.
go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. It was funny because it was David Damien who really pushed me into the two documentaries that we produced, because he was like, you're in entertainment, and one of the greatest ways to humanize issues is documentaries. And, instead of hearing statistics and data from organizations, it's nice to put a face to that statistic. And when you follow an 8-year-old in a field who doesn't like strawberries, and you go, how does a kid not like strawberries? And he said, because it hurts my back when I pick it. That's heart wrenching. And you go, oh wow, I never thought about that. Some people don't even know strawberries grow on the ground, and so it's important to put a face to these vulnerable communities and people, but at the same time, celebrate them and applaud them for the work that they do for us.
Right. So tell us about Altissimo Live.
Yes, so Altísimo Live is a live stream Latin music and pop culture festival to celebrate Cinco de Mayo, and it's to raise money for the farm workers during the COVID-19 pandemic relief fund. And it's created by the Justice for Migrant Women. It supports silent heroes, feeding us and keeping our nation moving. They're fearless frontline farm workers who have been deemed essential. And so we have an amazing lineup. I'm going to see, let's see, do I have any here? It'll be online, but the money raised through the fund will be dispersed to about 25 farm working organizations across the United States to help provide food and formula and diapers and emergency financial assistance, medical needs, and any other support that they're going to need. And so performances are going to air through Facebook Live, YouTube, Twitch, Twitter, as well as many other various platforms, including iHeart Latinos radio stations and websites. So, there's more than 2 million U.S. farm workers who are being affected by the coronavirus. And so we want to make sure that they know we're with them, we see them, and we support them.
And I've been asked to mention that in support of the farm workers and that event, checks can be mailed and made payable to Hispanics in Philanthropy with Farm Workers Pandemic Relief Fund written in the check memo line. And the Hispanics in Philanthropy address is 414 13th Street, Suite 200, Oakland, California, 94612. And before we finish up, let me say that Farmworker Justice is an advocacy organization for farm workers, serving farm workers who can't afford to pay for the services we provide. So we depend on supporters to make it possible for us to carry out our work. And people can support Farmworker Justice by going to our website, farmworkerjustice.org, and donate there, or send a donation through the mail at the address in DC that's there. We also have active social media sites on Facebook and on Twitter, and increasingly on Instagram. This series of programs on farm workers in the COVID-19 era will also be posted on the Farmworker Justice YouTube channel. And I wanted to especially mention that a generous donor recently gave us a matching challenge grant. So if we raise $30,000, that donor will give us $30,000. So effectively, your donation will be doubled. We hope you will contribute. So before we finish up, Eva, let me ask you, is there social media, are there social media platforms where people can follow you and your philanthropic work?
Yeah, I'm everywhere. I'm on Instagram, Eva Longoria, Twitter, Eva Longoria, Facebook, I think it's Eva Longoria. But yeah, I'm there. I usually put everything everywhere. You can also follow the Eva Longoria Foundation account as well. We have some really great information and resources at our website.
Well, again, thank you so much for being with us today to raise awareness about the issues that farm workers and their families are facing during the COVID era, and to support the need for support to farm workers directly, for the need for advocacy, the need for publicity to raise public awareness about the solutions that people in their own lives can help us achieve. So again, thanks.
Thank you for the work you do, and I'll be posting about y'all on my channel, so so hopefully we can direct some traffic your way.
We'd appreciate that very much. Have a good day.
Thank you.